Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition, or as I'll refer to it for the rest of this video, D&D 4e. The black sheep of D&D editions, 4e is a system that is near and dear to my heart. It was my first ever tabletop RPG experience, and it showed me a whole other world of gaming I'd never known about until that point. Also, speaking of gaming, I'll be playing Hades as B-roll for this video, so enjoy that. Or put this on in the background and just listen, whatever floats your boat. 4e's lifespan was a short one, spanning from 2007 to 2013. I started playing in 2012. Basically all the books were out at that point, which I think is a good thing. Having all the options available made it a lot easier to make characters you really liked. Nowadays I play a lot of other systems, like Cortex Prime, Blades in the Dark, and Masks. Those systems are a lot better at telling narrative-focused games, but when I want something more tactical, 4e is still my go-to. I'm not going to pretend like 4e isn't a very combat-focused game, and if that's not what you want out of a tabletop RPG, then that's totally fine. But lots of people seem to act like other editions of D&D aren't heavily combat-focused. 4e has just as much role-playing opportunity as other editions. So why am I making this video? Well, at the end of my Tunic video, I alluded to the fact that I was going to make a response to a certain creator's 4e video. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized a lot of the things I'd be talking about required a base knowledge of 4e to really understand. So I figured I'd make this as sort of a companion piece to that eventual video. In this video, I'll be making a character and going over the aspects of the game as they come up in character creation. The only other edition of D&D I've played is 5e, so that's my only other reference point, but 5e is pretty popular, so that's probably the edition most people are familiar with anyways. So without wasting any more time, let's go ahead and make a character. Also, if you're wondering what I'm using to make this character, it's the offline character builder. Head on over to the 4e D&D subreddit, link in the description, and check out the pinned posts. Now, of course, some of this can be done in a different order, but to keep things simple, I'll be going in order that the character builder does. So, step 1, pick a class. As you can see, there's a lot of them, so how do you go about deciding which one to play? You could just read every single class and see what interests you, but that's a lot of work. Luckily, every class has 2 traits you can look at to get an idea of what they're all about: power source and rule. Power source is what it sounds like. It's how your character expresses their strength. The power sources are arcane, divine, martial, primal, and psionic. There's also shadow, but that was made towards the end of 4e's life cycle and it isn't as fleshed out as the other 5. Those all seem pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to treat you like idiots and explain what all those mean. Each power source also leans a certain way. Martial characters tend to deal more damage than non-martial characters of the same role. Primal characters are more tanky, psionic and arcane characters dish out more status effects, and divine characters dish out more healing. The other trait to look at is role. Role in this case meaning your character's role in the party. Like I said earlier, 4e is a very combat-focused game, so to help keep a balanced party, the designers made 4 roles a character could fall into. Generally, if you're new, you should have at least 1 role of each in the party. Then when you're more experienced, you can experiment with more silly things, like having a party of all healers or something like that. The roles are Defender, Striker, Leader, and Controller. Defender does what it says on the tin, defend. They're the frontline tanks, keeping the squishies in the back safe. All defenders have the ability to mark an enemy. A marked enemy takes penalties when attacking someone other than whoever marked them. This includes the defender dishing out some damage to the enemy who dared disrespect their mark. If you want to keep your friends safe, this is the role for you. Striker is also pretty easy to figure out. They focus on striking the enemy down, aka dealing lots of damage. Each striker has different mechanic boosting their damage. Sometimes it's just a flat bonus based on an ability modifier, or sometimes they have to meet a condition like a rogue needing combat advantage. Either way, if you're looking to dish out the most damage possible, this is the role that you want. Leader is a bit confusing due to the name. They aren't de facto the leader of the party, but they could be. Healer is more accurate, but people may not have wanted to play this role if they just thought they'd be a heal bot, so I understand why they did it. Leaders support the party with healing, buffing, and sometimes granting extra attacks. All leaders have a healing power they can use twice per encounter to heal an ally, or themselves. These powers all heal for a similar amount, but have something extra attached, such as the bard getting to slide whoever was healed, or the shaman getting to spread the healing between their main target and someone next to their spirit companion. If you want to be in a supporting role while still contributing plenty to the party, this is the role to take. Controllers, last, and some might argue least, live up to their name in that they control the enemies. Not directly most of the time, but through the creation of zones, debuffs, and status conditions. Controllers don't get a unique mechanic like the other roles, leading people to wonder if they're really needed for a balanced party. The closest to a mechanic controllers get is they generally have more area attacks than any other class. Even then, some classes like the Sorcerer, a striker, get plenty of area attacks. Controllers don't always get the love they deserve, but dishing out status conditions and making the DM hate you for ruining their monsters sounds fun, then maybe check out a controller. For this video, we'll be going with a fighter. I find fighters much more fun in this edition than in 5e, and that's because of the power system, which we'll be getting to later. On the side here, we can see a brief overview of what fighters get access to. Under key abilities, there are 4 listed, which seems like a lot. Fortunately, you won't need to invest in all of them. For all characters, the first ability is the primary one, in this case Strength. The rest are secondaries that change depending on what build you decide to go with. Now that we've picked our class, you'll soon see some more options that we need to choose. All classes have certain features. You'll choose a character creation that will have them play differently than someone of the same class that chose a different feature. Kind of like a subclass. Since this is a much more limited selection than the class list, I'd recommend just reading them all and deciding which one fits best with the flavor of character that you want to go for. On top of class, at 11th level you pick a Paragon path, and at 21st you pick an Epic Destiny. Since this is just a 4e primer, I won't go into too much detail on these. Both of them are like bonus classes you get on top of your base class. Paragon paths are generally gated by whatever class you chose, sometimes by the race you are, and are oftentimes build defining. Epic Destinies are generally a lot looser with their requirements, many of them having no prerequisites at all other than the mandatory B level 21 that comes with all of them. They're less build defining than Paragon paths, but still come with many nice features, the coolest of which is many of them have a built-in comeback from the dead feature if you're ever slain in battle. Like I said, this is just a primer, but if you're interested in them, then do some reading online. They're all really flavorful. Next up, we're choosing a race. Like with the classes, there's quite a bit of them. You can do decently with any race class combination, as long as you set your ability scores correctly. For someone just starting out though, I'd recommend finding all the races that give a bonus to at least your primary ability score, and then deciding from there. Every race gets 2 ability score bonuses, a couple of skill bonuses, and then some features that differentiate them from all of the other races in the game. For this build, I'll go with a Goliath. They get a bonus to Strength and your choice of either Constitution or Wisdom, both of which are secondaries for a fighter. Plus they have a racial power to gain some damage resistance every fight, which seems handy on a class that will generally be taking a lot of hits. All in all, a pretty good race to be a fighter. Next up, background and theme. These are optional things that give your character a little something extra. It's not build defining, but it can help flesh out what your character's life was like before becoming an adventurer. Despite what people may say, 4e has plenty of room for role-playing. Not every group uses these, so I won't spend too much time on them. Backgrounds give you a small benefit at character creation. Generally, it's either +2 to a skill or adding a skill to the ones that you can be trained in. Out of the provided backgrounds, I consider the most powerful benefit using your highest ability score rather than Constitution at first level for your starting HP. This generally results in 8 to 10 extra max health at first level, which is quite a bit in the early game, but becomes less relevant as you level. You can make up any background you want depending on what setting you're in. If you're in a homebrew setting, then obviously the pre-made ones aren't going to exactly fit whatever you're playing. But the ones in the character build are the ones from Wizards modules that they made over 4E's lifespan. Themes give more of a benefit than backgrounds. You generally get an encounter power, some bonuses at later levels, and the option to take your theme powers rather than class powers at certain levels. Again, they're nice for fleshing out your character, but definitely not necessary. If you are in a game and you're unsure about themes, I'd say either everyone should have them or no one should. If only some characters take a theme, things start to feel a bit unbalanced, as the theme characters can do more than the non-theme characters. For this video, just to keep it simple, I won't be taking a theme or background. Next, ability scores. These determine how good your character is at doing certain things. A change they made in this edition is they switched the positions of Constitution and Dexterity. That's because in this edition, instead of making, say, a Wisdom save or a Dexterity save, you have defenses that enemies target, much like how AC is a defense that enemies target. Fortitude is based on the higher of your Strength or Constitution, Reflex is based off your Dexterity or Intelligence, and Will based off your Wisdom or Charisma. It was just easier to switch the original order of Constitution and Dexterity to keep things easy to read. As for actually selecting your ability scores, there's a couple of methods. You can roll 4d6 and keep the best 3, giving you anywhere from a 3 to an 18, with 13 being, the height of that bell curve. You can use the standard array of scores that Wizards figured was a good starting place for new players, or you can use the point buy system. With point buy, you start with a certain number of points, in this case 22. The higher a number gets, the more points it costs. The character builder here gives a nice little area showing how many points certain increases cost and how many points you have left. Any racial bonuses get added after you choose your scores, so the highest end ability can be at level 1 is 20, if you buy an 18 and have a bonus in that stat. This is also how you stay competitive if you pick a race that doesn't give a bonus to your primary stat. An 18 is good enough for all but the most hardcore games, so just invest your points there and hopefully your racial bonuses give you decent scores elsewhere. Normally I would use point buy, but just for simplicity I'll use the standard array. Next up are skills. Skills are what your character is good at outside of combat. Each class gets a different number of trained skills at level 1. Most get 4, some classes like the fighter get a bit shafted and only have 3, and some like the rogue get up to 6. Each class also has a different list of skills that they can be trained in at first level. Feats can give you training in more skills, so I'll go over that when we get to feats. The only other note on skills is some powers require you to be trained in a specific skill. If you like planning ahead, then you can check out if a power you like needs a skill, but if not, then just pick whatever you think seems cool. All skills end up being useful somehow. Now we come to powers, the part of 4E that I really feel is the bread and butter of the system. I've heard a lot of suggestions for systems that are like 4E, but none of them have a power system even close to this one. If I'm a martial class, and my only option in combat is to hit something with my sword while the wizard stops time and other nonsense like that, then your system is not like 4E. The power system keeps all the characters balanced around each other, so they all feel equally as powerful as you go through the levels. Some people claim this makes all the characters feel samey. Now, I can't tell people how to feel, but I will say I've played lots of 4E, and even within the same role, I find the classes feeling very distinct. So, what are powers? Well, they're kind of like spells, but every class can use them. Powers have 3 levels, for lack of a better term, for how often you can use them. At-will powers can be used as often as you want. Encounter powers once per fight, after which you need a short rest, which is usually about 5 minutes of in-game time. And lastly, daily powers, which can be used once per in-game day, again after which you will need to take an extended rest before you can use it again. So instead of using a basic attack, which would be strength versus AC to hit and 1 weapon plus strength mod damage, you'd use an at-will like Cleave. Cleave is the exact same as a basic attack, except you also deal a bit of damage to an adjacent enemy. Or perhaps you would use Footwork Lure, which allows you to reposition yourself and the enemy you hit. The only time you'd use a basic attack is if you charge, which requires a basic attack, or if you're granted an extra attack by a leader. In every other circumstance, an at-will is just strictly better. So, how many of these powers do you get? Well, at first level, you get 2 at-wills, 1 encounter, and 1 daily. You get more encounter and daily powers as you level, but never more at-wills. Except for psionic classes, but they're weird and I'd rather not get into that in a video just trying to explain the basics. Also, as you level at certain levels like 2 and 6 and other ones, which I'm not going to name the exact levels of right now, you get things called utility powers. They follow the same structure as the other powers. They're at-will utilities, encounter and dailies, and so forth. But utility powers generally don't deal damage, at least not directly. Some of them increase your damage for a round, some of them increase your defenses, some of them give you a bonus to a skill. They do a wide variety of things. So, when picking powers, just read them over and see what you like. For the fighter, they have a lot of powers that can only be used if you meet certain requirements, like having a hand free or using a shield. They also have a lot of bonuses based on your weapon you're using. The bonuses are nice, but they're generally never so good that it's mandatory to take the attack. Let's look at a power like Serpent's Coil. If you're using a flail, then you get to grab the target. That's pretty nice. It means they're going to have a harder time getting away from you. But that benefit isn't so nice, it's a must-have for all flail users. Other classes get similar bonuses on powers, but they're usually based on what build/subclass you chose at character creation. Let's take my Warden I have on file as a quick example. My Roots of Stone power makes a zone that knocks enemies prone if they leave it. I chose the Earth Strength subclass, so they also take damage when they leave. Extra damage is always nice, but it's not so nice I couldn't have taken another power if I wanted. Anyways, back to our fighter. I'll just take some random powers since this isn't a build I'll actually be taking to a game. We're in the home stretch. The final bit of our build here will be feats. You get feats on every even-numbered level, as well as levels 1, 11, and 21. Individually, feats give you a small bonus, which is just nice to have. A bonus to attacks, a bonus to skills, things like that. Sometimes, though, you can combine feats to great effect. The feat Flail Expertise gives you a bonus to attacks with a flail, and if you would slide a target, you can knock them prone instead. That's pretty nice. Our Footwork Lure at will power slides enemies, so this would allow you to knock the enemy prone if they're already in a good spot. However, this feat works exceptionally well with the feat Dragging Flail. Dragging Flail says whenever you knock an enemy prone with a flail, you can slide them one square. This is a personal favorite build of mine. It makes it very hard for enemies to get away from you, since they have to spend their whole movement just standing up. If they try to get away, that means they're not attacking. There's also a magic weapon that stops teleporting, which is generally the easiest way an enemy will have to get away from the predicament that you've put them in. There's also non-combat feats as well, such as skill training. If there's a skill you really want to be trained in, but it wasn't available to your class, then this is a way to get it. There is a better way than that, though. Multiclassing. Yes, multiclassing is here, and it works differently than how it does in other editions. Instead of taking levels in other classes, you can take a multiclass feat. There are different types of multi-class feats, but the basic ones give you training in one of the class's skills and one of their at-will powers as an encounter power. You can also take power swap feats to get a power from the other class rather than your main one. The main benefit, though, is you count as that class for the purposes of feats and paragon paths. You can only take one multi-class feat, so you have to choose wisely. No being a member of every class. Unless you're a bard. Bards have a feature that lets them take as many multi-class feats as they want, so if that's what you're looking for, go nuts. There's also hybriding. It's a bit complicated, so I won't go into it too much, but here's the gist of it. It's a choice you make at character creation. You pick two classes and get a few features from each, and your powers are split evenly between them. It can be difficult to play in a way that doesn't just make you wish you were playing the normal version of either of those classes, but the flavor is just mwah, chef's kiss. And if you find a build that synergizes with itself, you feel like a genius. And with that, we're basically done. One note, some of you may be thinking, if everyone gets powers, how do I do cool things like knock to unlock doors or continual light so we don't need torches? Well, that's where rituals come in. Anyone trained in Arcana or Religion can take the Ritual Caster feat, and some classes like Wizard get it for free at character creation. Rituals are where you get all your cool, non-combat oriented spells. Magic is a bit nerfed in 4E, and I can understand why. Think about it. In a world with both fireball and people fighting with swords, magic is busted. In 4E, if you want to get around needing someone who's good at thievery or need to buy torches, you're gonna have to work for it. Rituals cost resources, usually gold, and take time. The component cost is usually low enough that you can easily cover it at your level, but high enough that you can't just use rituals all willy-nilly. The time element is there just so you can't have the wizards snap their fingers and solve whatever problem you're facing. If you want a ritual to solve your problem, you either need to plan in advance or find a way to stall until it's done. And that's it. Get yourself some basic equipment, name your hero, and you're good to go on an adventure. Obviously, this isn't everything to know about 4E. I'm sure there's plenty that I'll bring up in my Puffin Forest response video that I didn't mention here. This is just an overview of how to make a character and what elements of 4E are generally most important to know about. The Puffin Forest response will be my next video, probably. I doubt anything will come before that, but I might be divinely inspired like I was with Tunic. At any rate, I'll be back sometime in the future with some sort of video. Until then, I will bid you adieu.